Hello and welcome everyone. My name's Andrew Didier. I work at the University of East London. We're based pretty much where the Olympics took place a couple of years ago now. And my role, I'll just say a little bit about myself. My context is that I work with a team of academic tutors, maths tutors and EAP tutors. Basically, we provide support. Um, and this presentation is just kind of looking at how we not only do we provide our looking at new ways to embed digital literacy and also to use all the new technologies that are becoming just in terms of UEL, just to tell you a little bit about the university itself, we're located in one of the most diverse boroughs in England. So there's how many countries, but within our university itself, we've got 120 nationalities. We're quite unusual in the fact that about 50% of our population are the first in the family to attend university, or the mature students, and we have a high trying to sort of speak and hear so that you can hear me. Is that better? Can you all hear me? I'm hoping that. Okay, I will speak like this for the whole of the presentation. Yeah, so as I was just saying, our one of the key features of our sort of student population is its diversity and the sort of range of languages, different experiences that each student brings. For the purpose of today, skipped a bit. So my aim for today was to kind of, as I mentioned, to talk a little bit about digital literacy within our particular context, and to, I mean, I find as just even the definition of digital literacy is somewhat problematic because different people have got different ideas about what it actually is. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and explore some of the kind of trends and some of the challenges in terms of how um, technology is being embedded. And I thought it's quite interesting what Karina was saying earlier, what's expected from us as learning developers and sort of maybe expectations that are because of the various kind of institutional, political. So as well as looking at some of the trends and potential challenges in terms of embedding digital literacy, then offer up the University of East London and a particular case study where we've started using our giving every student a tablet in terms to enable them to access digital literacy. So just moving along, this particular slide, this is where I kind of took or took the basis of. Oh, okay. I'm not sure if I can make the volume any better. I have put it up loud. I do apologise. I always have. Hopefully that's slightly better. Okay, I will keep holding it nice and close as Marina has just said. Thank you, Marina. um, so yes, so this slide is kind of something which is taken from the New Media Consortium, which is a global organisation which looks at trends within digital literacy or digital technology across the whole world. I'm going to be focusing mainly on our solvable challenges, or what they consider to be solvable challenges. I'm not quite sure if I agree, and it'd be quite interesting to find out what different people's ideas and thoughts are in terms of digital literacy, how you define it, how it applies in your own particular context. And for that purpose, just if I just skip back a little bit, I kind of just like you to sort of think about your own particular definition of digital literacy and how it kind of affects each of you in your own specific context, and how maybe it might compare or contrast with some of the challenges and some of the ways we've been doing things within East London and within the UK. So going back to the NMC, they basically have a list of some of the different challenges and some of the different trends which are sort of in terms of technology. And in terms of short-term, some of the short-term challenges, which are sort of looking at the next 1 to 2 years, as I said, they sort of consider it a solvable challenge that we can just improve digital literacy. And there's a lot of sort of controversy and debate in terms of, you know, our students are already digitally literate, so how much do we really need to teach them? Looking at some of the sort of things which are coming across in terms of MOOCs and massive online courses, and all the challenges. There's things around adaptive learning. So there's all this new technology that we're being expected to embrace and take into our teaching. But what does it actually mean in our own specific learning development context? So I'm taking this part of solvable challenges. Again, it's looking at how we blend formal and informal learning and thinking about improving digital literacy. And some of the trends that have been identified by the NMC is this idea around the way that we use our learning spaces and the way that we increase the use of blended learning. So when I talk about blended learning, we're sort of looking at the use of IT as within our face-to-face teaching and how those things assist our students. I think one of the things around digital technologies, it's like it influences every sort of aspect of our everyday life, and within higher education, it's no sort of exception. The different sort of trends and excuse me. Yeah, so the different trends and the different uses of IT, if we sort of go back to this idea of what the challenges are, and just before I sort of look at this slide, actually, I'd like to throw out a question just to everyone, just in terms of this idea that digital literacy is a challenge. It'd be quite useful just to get some questions, perhaps, from some of our colleagues to see whether or not you consider digital literacy to be a challenge within your own institution. I mean, what I'm sort of thinking about here is perhaps why it might be considered a challenge, um, some of the different ways that you might already be using it. Yes, that's something that part of the reason I did this presentation is we're in the process of developing a digital literacy strategy which is student facing. So part of the things that we're looking at are how our students, yeah, exactly, it's yeah, very ill defined. This idea that what actually is digital literacy, it can be controversial. There's a few people typing. Yeah. I think that's a really interesting point because it's this idea that you're going to use the technology rather than using it as a tool, so it's kind of form over function. What is it we're trying to achieve? And we have to use technology to do it, whereas actually maybe a pencil might work. That might be quite controversial, but we'll come back to that. Some of the kind of challenges that I sort of identified in terms of why it could possibly be a challenge for higher education is exactly what some of you guys have said here. This idea that there's a lack of consensus about what digital literacy actually is. So what are we actually talking about? Are we talking about the ability to use MS Office projects, or if on a particular program, particular pieces of software that architecture might use? So what is it that we're talking about? Is it the ability to be able to blog confidently? Is it the ability to stay safe online? Another kind of definition problem which is kind of attached to this lack of consensus is the differences in the way that digital literacy is approached by students, our learners and staff. So the expectations perhaps that we as learning developers and tutors and academics have for our students, and the expectations that our students have of us as learning developers of people that are teaching, whereas I kind of see it as much more of a sort of symbiotic relationship. And I think there is also this idea around student experience versus the institutional and academic practice of what is actually expected for you to know and how you're actually expected to use your technology. And around all of this is the fact that it's all changing so very quickly. So what was news last year is suddenly it goes, suddenly you have to start using something else. It's constantly changing. You're constantly having to sort of keep up, and all of this takes time. Again, something that was mentioned in one of the previous um, presentations was this idea of never having enough time to actually get to grips with all the things that are going on and trying to sort of become au fait with some of the new technology. I think that part of this idea that hold on, I've got someone typing, so I'm trying to read and talk at the same time. So I think one of the things that sort of comes from all of this is this idea that within our context, the diversity of expectations, uh, that from both academic staff, from our students, what actually being digitally literate means, and the fact that everything changes all the time and the amount of effort it takes to keep up to date with it all. That's why I believe that this is a bit of a challenge, but apparently all of this is solvable, so there is some light at the end of the tunnel. And yes, Sandra just said yes, when it's harnessed well, it positions the student as a producer of knowledge than just as a consumer, absolutely. And I think that it is this idea of trying to use technology to assist you rather than as a means to an end. I think that's the one thing that is the real driving force. Well, I believe in terms of being able to use it effectively. So I kind of just now going to just turn to some of the definitions that I've come across. Now, JISC is an organisation over in the UK which looks at technology across further education, higher education, and so it has quite an influential effect in terms of how we define it. And there's lots of very good work that they're doing. So I definitely recommend sort of people having a look at some of the work that they've got on board. So I've taken this particular definition, and again, what would be quite helpful is as we're sort of looking at this, if you kind of have any comments to make in terms of the way that digital literacy is actually defined. This idea, for example, that it's the capabilities which fit someone for living, learning and working in a digital society. I mean, that's what it is, but then what does that actually mean? If we're trying to unpick that, what does it mean to be sort of living in a what makes us fit to sort of live in a digital society? What are the kind of things and the capabilities that we need? So this one particular definition that you've got there. I've taken a second definition from the Open University, which again was a kind of leader at the very beginning when one of the first people to sort of look at having online resources over here in the UK. So I've got this definition here. Digital literacy, which includes the ability to find and use information, otherwise known as information literacy, but goes beyond this to encompass communication, collaboration and teamwork, social awareness in the digital environment, understanding of e-safety and creation of new information. Both digital and information literacy are underpinned by critical thinking and evaluation. So this is quite an interesting one here in that it's not only just about using it, but being able to think quite critically about it, which kind of, as well as having the ability to use the tools that are at your hand, so various digital pieces of technology, it's also about being able to use it critically and kind of thinking about why and how and all those kind of questions you would use in terms of deciding what information to use. Again, the link here will give you much more information. We've got a few more people typing here. hoping that you can still hear me. um, yeah. Yes. Yes, I think there is this idea of being able to engage critically, which kind of comes to the crux of it, because I think sometimes we're sort of given technology as a panacea to solve everything, but obviously we have to make sure that it fits the purpose for what you want it to do. It's not just a case of using digital technology or equipment or software for its sake. It's kind of what is the the form, the reason behind doing it. So with that in mind, I've got quite a controversial cartoon I was pointed out. When I showed this to one of my colleagues, said that it might cause a bit of offence. So I apologise in advance if I do that. But this is based on some of the kind of, I guess, the categorization of students in terms of digital natives versus digital immigrants. And it's this idea that Prensky, talking maybe 13 or 14 years ago, was talking about being a digital native. So this idea that if you're under 25, you're born in the age of technology, everything comes naturally, there's nothing to learn, there's nothing to teach. It goes on to say if you're over that age, you can learn about technology, but you've got to work at it. This idea that if you're even older than you forget it, you're not going to know anything about technology and you're not going to be able to use it. And it kind of just writes off a whole band of our population. I mean, this is clearly very problematic, and I think one of the things around this is just that you know, this idea that sometimes we have our students in front of us and there can be assumptions that are made about, you know, if you're born in the digital age, okay, if you're born in the digital age, then all of it will be easy. Whereas actually, when we come into learning development within higher education, absolutely within life later, it's much more about how and what you use and maybe learning new skills which you haven't been exposed to in your previous life. Even though you might be able to use the latest sort of gadget in terms of your smartphone, it might not be very good to you in terms of being able to use AutoCAD, for example, if you're an academic. Um, I'm just having a look at a few of the. Yes. Yeah. So, so Mark Prensky's initial kind of idea around having digital natives, digital immigrants, I think was slightly problematic. Um, a later sort of definition, if you like, in terms of a later definition in terms of looking at like a retasking of this sort of idea. It's the idea of visitors and residents, which places people onto a sort of continuum in terms of categorization. I mean, there's always problems in terms of categorizing people in any way, shape, or form. But this, rather than saying you're kind of fixed and you're stuck in a particular position, there's no hope for you. This kind of idea about you might be a visitor, so you go in and you pick and choose the areas online that you're going to use. So you go on for a specific task or a specific activity. You may have a professional, for example, online presence, but in terms of your personal life, you are never there. So somewhere, you know, so it's like you might be on Facebook constantly, you might be using Twitter, but then and you might be doing that as part of your institutional life, but in terms of your personal life, you're just offline all the time. So it's just kind of where you might place yourself, and I think this is quite an interesting way to consider and just think about where we place ourselves, and also where we place our students, where we place our academics, in terms of their understanding, in terms of our view and their views of us, in term when it comes to sort of thinking about this idea of digital literacy, because you could place yourself for different positions, for different reasons, within a different sort of quadrant of this sort of figure. And then I kind of wanted to again move on a little bit. Oops. So I'm giving you lots and lots of theory, and then I'm going to try to apply it to the sort of institutional our institutional context, if you like. So I've kind of taken these 7 elements of digital literacy within here, and thinking again about a more kind of concrete and specific idea of what is determined and what is meant by digital literacy. So we've got 7 points here. So here you're looking at how you read media, thinking about communication and collaboration, and how you participate in digital networks. So something like this, for example, your career and identity management. So how you manage yourself online, which is becoming a bit more of a hot potato. Keep holding my mic, I shall. Becoming more of a hot potato these days because nothing really gets lost online. So this is becoming quite important in terms of your career and identity management. There is the ability to actually use ICT and to adopt and adapt digital devices. How quickly can you use it? I know within our sort of institution, we've just had SharePoint introduced, which has been a very steep learning curve in terms of for all of us staff. And again, how does that affect your day-to-day life? So in terms of us teaching students, but we ourselves as academics are also having to learn, often alongside students, how to use and sort of try to understand sort of changing landscapes. And I think part of it is about learning how to learn. So how to sort of study and learn effectively in these technology-rich environments kind of means that it's not a case of knowing something and then being the expert in it, but constantly being able to keep going and to sort of keep learning new skills and not being afraid to try out new stuff, and making sure that you may make a mistake, but it doesn't really matter too much if you make a mistake because you're learning all the time. I think an emerging area as well around digital scholarship and sort of being able to participate in sort of our emerging academic and professional practices that may depend on digital systems, and how that's going to evolve over the next few years. That's quite an interesting thing to think about. And then finally, information literacy, again, going back to critical and being able to evaluate what sources and what information can be used. Because increasingly, the kind of information that is useful is not necessarily written in a book anymore. Okay, we've got some more typing coming on. So this initial descriptor was, I think, developed around 2004. Yeah. And then a later sort of idea, sort of a shift away. It's still the same sort of ideas, but kind of quite liked this kind of overlapping circles, just because at the heart of it is this sort of comfort and being able to not be afraid of ICT and being proficient in it. But then you've also got overlapping circles around your information, data and media literacies, digital creation and innovation and scholarship, which is this idea of an outsider anyone can just join in. It's not necessarily a closed shop, So there is this idea, because things are open, it opens it up to much more people. Okay, no problem, Mandy. And then your communication, collaboration and participation, digital learning and self-development. So this idea, these overlapping sort of circles, which are taken from sort of 7 pillars of information literacy. But then overriding all of this is the idea of digital identity and well-being, and that kind of is an overview of everything in terms of your sort of digital literacy. Just looking back at this, I wanted to sort of then shift to sort of looking at how this applies to the context here at UEL. And as I've sort of mentioned before, we've got a very diverse population here. Around 70% of our students are Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups. Got over 120 countries which are represented in the university population. 50% are mature students, 50% are the first in the family to go to university, and it's this is one of our sort of taglines, the idea that they're diverse, they're determined and resilient. But the reason why this is quite interesting, because again, there's lots of assumptions that are made around students' previous experience. So the fact that we've got 50% of our students are mature would sort of give rise to the fact that, oh, perhaps they're not going to be as good as at using digital literacy, when actually that's not necessarily the case. So it's just kind of just to have a little bit of context in terms of our student population. And then in terms of where we're sort of situated, our learning and language support is part of library learning services, and we work as quite a tight team. And we have our sort of subject librarians, which are embedded within each of the schools. We have our sort of tutors who cover maths, academic purposes, uh, uh, academic writing, and then we have learning achievement assistants who are ex-graduates from UEL who are working with students to provide a kind of holistic approach. And each of these different groups kind of add their own flavour, if you like, to our digital literacy. And I've kind of put the two together to kind of just show where there's a bit of an overlap in terms of how we look at digital literacy. So our librarians kind of help out with the sort of information media, information data and media literacies. We've got our learning achievement assistants who may work with us to help to develop how to sort of build a safe profile, if you like, online. Digital creation, innovation scholarship. So how do you become a digital scholar? Looking at different tools that are available. And each of us, I mean, again, we've all been a bit of a steep learning curve in terms of having to get used to new technologies, but also being able to use previous experience um, to sort of guide and assist students, and to also be guided and assisted by students. I kind of moved on to some of the strategies that we've sort of used, but I'm going to skip through that, I think, and just take you on to kind of like the main meat of this, because I've just sort of realised I've sort of been talking for half an hour and I haven't asked any questions. So one of the things that we started in 2014 was that each of our first year undergraduates received a Samsung Note tablet, and this was part of an initiative to assist students with this idea of being online, being sort of au fait or becoming au fait with digital technology, and making sure that everybody had access, because sometimes you've got different platforms, different pieces of software. So by sort of providing each of our first years with one of these tablets, they then were able to use all of the same platforms and to sort of use the same kind of piece of software. One of the things that we also sort of used was the Core Text app, which again allowed students to access their uh, uh, core textbooks online, and to be able to use have a direct link to a digital library with sort of tailored applications. And also there were portals which enabled students to access our Moodle, which was the virtual learning environment. And I'm going to just take a little pause here, because it might be just quite interesting again just to throw out a question to just to find out in terms of how each of the different sort of how you yourselves sort of access and use digital literacy, or how it impacts on your own roles as learning developers. So my question there would be just kind of how do you sort of integrate digital literacy within your own separate roles, and what kind of tools and software do you use yourself? And just while people are just talking. Oh, VLEs, yeah. I mean, just out of curiosity, what kind of platforms do people use across the world? Because over here we've got Blackboards and we've got Moodle, but I'm just wondering what other Blackboards, yeah. Oh, multiple attendees for typing. And just again, as a general kind of question, how happy are students using Moodle? I mean, I've heard anecdotally, some people love it, the idea that you have instant access to all of your slide notes, to all of your lectures, and other people hate having Moodle and everything has to be printed out, and we constantly get asked, why can't we just have a handout? I mean, I'm just quite interested to see how it works across, yeah. That's something that we've had to do. Arena's mentioned spend a lot of time sort of helping students navigate their course sites, which is something that I'll talk about a little later. But in addition to sort of introducing all of this, the new technology, there is a piece of work which is actually being able to assist learners to use this technology. Because again, yeah, there is that whole thing. So, no, thank you. So just going back, so when we introduced the this tablet, it was this whole idea of having something that students had to hand, which was accessible, which provided instant access to their virtual learning environments, which provided instant access to core text and their core textbooks, which had links to specific parts of their. Haven't heard that one now. Sort of having instant access, and actually it made the news when we sort of gave them away. There was a number of students who were very pleased. As you can see, some students who were happy to be getting their new tablets, and we had some feedback from the students where they were really happy to have been provided with a piece of sort of a tablet and having a portable device which allowed textbooks to all in one place rather than carrying around lots of books, and able to sort of play around with their VLEs. Yeah, I think that was one of the big things, is that the textbooks, I mean, again, it was a bit controversial because actually people do like reading from books. So sometimes what's now happening is, even though we have our textbooks on our tablets, the students will still want to have the physical copy. So there is always this tension about the move to technology in order to sort of meet different costs and everything else, but then at the same time, the need to kind of have access to hard copies of things. So having a choice about how you access information, which is a bit of a controversy. So while the sort of 14-15 initiative went down quite well, there were a few sort of issues in terms of, one of the things we learned was just, I think, who mentioned it earlier, I think it was Marina. I think someone mentioned earlier the idea of being able to provide face-to-face support to students so that they could actually access it. So when we rolled this out this year, we had to produce a lot more kind of support in terms of how people use the tablets, what kind of resources are available, and having face-to-face, even though we've sort of developed online presentations, students still wanted to actually see a physical person. So this idea of being replaced by a computer package, I can't see that happening anytime soon, because even though all of this technology allows us to be more accessible, more people to reach it, there's still a question of how students are accessing it and getting used to this online approach. Um, I I've put this in just because basically, oh, we've got Rowena was typing. Yeah, exactly, the sort of literacy and digital literacy. Um, so our next stages for us here are sort of looking at what kinds of resources and what kind of things we need to sort of put online or provide access to via tablets. Yeah, to how to use the literacy part, yeah. And so I did a breakdown of all of the kind of questions that we've been asked over the last sort of 6 months, and it's quite interesting that some of the things that came up. So this is looking across maths and um, academic writing, English for academic purposes, and it was kind of a lot of the things that come up are things around discussion, things around our formatting, things around how we actually work together, um, sort of the common sort of bread and butter work around kind of putting together um, assignments, get preparing for exams and things like that. But what was quite interesting is when I sort of looked through all of it, it was the discussion part that people are particularly interested in. So it kind of leads me to think that there's quite a piece of work for us to do here in terms of how we make this kind of information available and help students to, or help ourselves to kind of discuss what some of the challenges are. Um, and another new initiative is around diagnostic assessment and adaptive learning, which is looking at students' starting points in terms of where they are and how they sort of progress over the 3 years that they're at university. We're using a piece of software at the moment called BKSB, which is just for our first years, but we've also used a number of sort of diagnostic uh, pieces of software in conjunction with some of the more formative stuff. And again, it'd be quite interesting just to kind of just to look at where our colleagues are in terms of any particular bits of software or pieces of or how they approach kind of getting students engaged with it. Because I think one of the things, if we go back to the challenges, one of the biggest challenges is to get, I find, is to maybe engage people in doing something that might not necessarily be what they've done before. So it'd again be interesting just to think about how others have sort of approached that. I'm just going back through some of the comments. So So that was the end of what I had said. I put some sources at the end just in case you might be interested in some of the sort of places that I've referenced. But I think I've still got lots of time left to sort of have a quick chat. So I'm going to go back to the our sort of challenges, and I just wonder, sort of look at how do uh, sort of colleagues address the various challenges in terms of how do we decide what digital literacy is? How do we um, cope with this sort of rapidly changing landscape? And how do we kind of deal with the tension sometimes between the student experience versus the institutional and academic practice? just going back through some of the previous comments. And just thinking, coming back and thinking about how, let's have a quick look. Yeah, I think David has sort of printed guides. It's kind of defeats the purpose of being online sometimes if you have a whole load of information about how to do it. It's kind of a bit problematic there. Yeah, we got that. But also, it might be just interesting thinking about what if what differences in terms of what we as maybe learning developers think around how students should be digitally literate, and then how students themselves feel they should be digitally literate. I mean, yeah, I think I think it was John right at the very beginning. This idea of having the notion of literacy hijacked by being digitally literate, but actually, is it not more about our general understanding of how to engage, evaluate, and use information critically? Mm. Yeah, our learning achievement assistants. Just David's mentioned peer learning as a way to encourage and support. So we have used our learning achievement assistants in terms of being able to support and show how they've used digital literacy within or different pieces of software, so bits of tech or different applications within their degree, and how that's helped them. And then roving digital wizards. Oh, you might have to explain that one further. But yes, having opportunities sort of to discuss and look at what are the best um, ways to sort of disseminate, if you like, the different apps that you use in terms of communicating your ideas around digital literacy. Um, just going through. And I think I've kind of used up my, more or less, I don't think, oh no, people are still typing. Mm, yeah, that's quite an interesting point there, just being able to, wanting to do things rather than having to. So this idea of being forced to do it, so moving away from punitive um, learning to sort of being something that you just do because it's interesting, because you want to, because you're motivated to do it. So moving towards intrinsic kind of motivation. I think that's a very good question. I'm not sure how to answer that one, I'm afraid. So I'll leave that question as my ending thought. Just how do we actually sort of address this and start thinking about uh, how to motivate and sort of continue to find a time to become digitally literate ourselves as well as assisting others to do it. And so I'm just typing something. Yes, so Sandra's mentioned getting students to write and own beautiful blogs and getting people to set up digital assignments. We've done things around digital Twitter feeds, like tweeting about different events. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm going to leave you with those thoughts because I think I've got lots of about another 15 minutes. But I think just in terms of it might be worth just thinking about some of the ways that you yourselves engage students within learning development and different platforms. What about digital literacy, future employment technologies, disciplines and workplaces? It's quite interesting, this point that you've put in here around digital literacy for future employment and technologies. Some of the things that come out on our side here in the UK is very much about being information, well, being literate in the sense of being able to communicate effectively in a workplace. There's quite a lot of work around this employability and what the expectations are, and it will vary across the different fields, I think. So uh, it does very much depend on where you're going into. I think this is one of the challenges in terms of digital literacy because it's so wide and so vague. It's very difficult to sort of have one standard response. Um, but being able to navigate, for example, through VLE, being able to navigate through an ebook are skills that can then be transferred to employment. So it's knowing that the same tools that you're using for this particular set of I don't know, software can be used elsewhere, I think. And that whole point about being able to produce and critique digital artifacts, the short videos, yes, they're the producers, and much more useful than being able to just write essays. Yeah. I think, well, again, this is about curriculum design. So then we're looking at digital literacy in terms of curriculum design and where does it actually get put into it? Because, yeah, we actually have a program here which takes everybody through all of the basics in terms of so Microsoft Office and becoming a sort of to a sort of moderate user or medium level user through something called ECDL. So all students have access to a program which allows them to be taught everything within those workplace skills, so Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint, databases. And in answer to that question, I don't know, that'd be maybe a question for everyone. Is it a foundational? So Rowena has asked if digital literacy is a foundational skill or something more complex. I suspect it's something far more complex, but it'd be quite useful to find out what others think about that. And also, I've got about 12 minutes. I am going to stop talking very soon because I'm aware that the next person will probably need to get themselves sort of organised and set up. But thank you for the sort of comments. It's really helpful and really useful. And I think this is the whole thing that, there is an assumption that students know how to use all of these things, but experience tells us that no, that it still is needed. And yes, moving towards coding and network and hardware, but there is still a question about being able to actually create a document. There is still of those things. So it's kind of a difficult one, and it is a challenge. But it is this whole question about just generally being able to understand and communicate and express yourself in a whole variety of different forms. I am going to stop talking now. Um, Thank you very much, everyone, for all your comments. It's been really interesting, and I hope that some of the examples I've given have been useful. Apologies for my very blustery start at the beginning and the poor sound, but thank you very much.